capture a client's intent. And Sarah, what types of questions do you typically get from clients regarding charitable bequests and planning?
Yeah, great. Thank you. So you've touched on some of them, but are there any other types of assets that you have seen that people are leaving in these bequests to the charitable organizations?
Yeah, so to give you an example, oftentimes, it may be that they say, I want to leave, 10% or $100,000 or $10,000 to this or that charity. And the clients oftentimes think, well, is cash the best thing to leave? That's simple. I give $10,000 from my estate. And that's fine. It captures the charitable intent. But when we talk about a gift, a transfer at death, particularly, we need to be thinking about transfer taxes. Now, assets that are in a person's estate generally receive a step up in basis to the date of death value. Meaning, and I'll give you a prime example. If I have some stock, let's just say it's Exxon stock, and I bought it at $10 a share, and it's now $100 a share. When I die, the basis is going to go from 10 to 100. So if I leave that stock, for instance, to my children, they are going to get that at $100 basis. And when they sell it, they have no gain. Now, I'm going to distinguish that from if I want to gift that stock during my lifetime. If I gift that stock to my children during my lifetime, even though the value might be $100 because it's appreciated so significantly, my children take my cost basis, meaning their basis is $10 a share. So when they sell it, they now have a $90 per share amount that is going to be subject to capital gains tax. So when we look at this, we need to distinguish, are we giving away during lifetime or giving away during death? And in that example, if I want to make a charitable gift and I'm doing it during my lifetime, a really great thing I could do would be to give away that stock that's appreciated to a charity during my lifetime, because the charity, when they sell it, they pay no capital gain because they're not an income tax paying entity. Whereas at death, if I want to leave something, my children get the step up in basis, so I don't have to worry about that. So, we see clients look at it that way. And as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about these retirement accounts, they don't get a step up in basis to date of death because they have not yet been taxed from an income standpoint. So if we have clients that say, look, I want to leave $100,000 to a charity, it might be better to, instead of putting $100,000 of cash under my will goes to the charity, maybe that client will name the charity as a beneficiary of the IRA up to $100,000. Because remember, when the charity is the beneficiary and the charity is forced to take money out of the IRA, the charity doesn't pay that income tax. Whereas if the child inherits the IRA, when the child withdraws $100,000, the child pays income tax on that. So that's something important. And any asset, can be left to a charity. They may use life insurance. It may be a retirement account. It may be a business interest, a personal property, real estate. So it can be done in very different ways.
Awesome. And we're seeing our donors get really creative with this. They're obviously being advised by some pretty smart cookies, because we're seeing a lot of these different forms of charitable giving coming our way to the foundation. And it's like you said, the tax implications, it's just a smarter way of doing it, and then leaving to the organization that they want to. So bequests are clearly a great option for charitable giving, but let's talk about a scenario, Nora, in which we've had the question, I've already worked on my will. I don't really have any major changes to it. If I wanted to work the foundation in, do I have to start from ground zero, or are we talking about some sort of like an amendment to it to create a bequest?
Yeah, and oftentimes changes to a will or a trust don't require the whole thing to be reworked. As I mentioned, earlier, when clients say, when do I have to come see you again? I say when something changes. And if that change is, hey, I'd like to leave $100,000 to the Foundation for Physical Therapy Research, you're not going to have to pay me to rewrite your entire will. Instead, it's a very quick codicil, which is essentially an amendment to a will or an amendment to the trust if the trust has the dispositive provisions. So literally, it could be a one-page document that says, I amend Article X of my trust or X of my will to make a specific bequest of cash, or I want to leave my Exxon stock to the foundation. So it can be done very, very simply. And one of the things I wanted to talk about are sort of donation agreements or intent forms, because I have oftentimes clients maybe that change that they talk about. They come in to see me and they say, "Hey, I met with someone from the foundation. I do want to give them $100,000. I signed an intention form with them, so that takes care of it, right? That means that will go to them upon my death." And the intention form, and Sarah may have some thoughts on this as well. It's not necessarily carrying the day, because that intention form says, yes, let's say the client's name is Jane Doe. Jane Doe, I intend to give $100,000 to the foundation when I die. But if Jane Doe doesn't go in and do that amendment to her will or change her beneficiary designation on her IRA to put the foundation on there, that intention form she hasn't really carried out the intent. And I've seen cases where that sort of has gone sideways. And one example I'll give you is I had a client who had signed an intention form like that. She wanted to give money to a particular college. But she never modified her will. She never changed the beneficiary designation. When she died, she had two sons, and unfortunately, they were pretty greedy, and they didn't honor that intention agreement. When we were doing her estate, they said, "Look, we don't want to leave money to this school. We don't think that intention agreement is enforceable." Now, of course, in that case, the school, didn't want to fight about it. They said, "Look, maybe Jane Doe changed her mind, so she didn't update her will," and it went away. But the reality is that woman's intention wasn't carried out because she didn't change her documents. Now, in some instances, the beneficiaries of the estate or the executor may say, "Well, no, mom signed this. She wanted this to be done. We're going to treat it as an obligation that the estate has." And so it can be carried out if the parties agree to it. But if you have people who are greedy or who disagree or question what your intent is, you really do need to take steps to firm up that intent by a will modification or a beneficiary designation.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that because, as you said, we do have an intention form for bequests and legacy giving to the foundation. But I think it's really important that people hear that there's a second step necessary, and, really confirming that your wishes will be carried out, and that it won't be challenged on either side, because that's a sad story. I'm sorry to hear that happened. So specifically, can donors restrict their bequests for specific purposes? Can they specify how it should be spent?
Absolutely. So I have some clients that may come in and see me and say, "Hey, I want to give $100,000 to the foundation when I die, but I want them to use it for something very specific, maybe something unique in the physical therapy world." Or maybe they say, "Look, I want to give them this money, but I don't want them to have it all at once, because I want to make sure that they benefit, every year for 10 years after my death." So that client could make a gift of $100,000 to the foundation and say it's to be used for a particular purpose. It has a restriction on it, which then must be honored generally. Or the client could say, "Look, I'm going to leave $100,000 in trust for the foundation, and my trustee is to give $10,000 a year to the foundation, or is to give the income to the foundation." So there's always something going to the foundation long after that person passes, not just in the year or two after they die. So that's absolutely something that a client can do, Sarah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for mentioning that. And we do see this often. So that's part of the intention form that the foundation has. And that's part of the conversation and the relationship building with somebody who wants to leave a legacy to our foundation, that we have these conversations about how you would like to see those funds used. And maybe there's a specific, type of physical therapy that you'd like the focus to be on, or maybe it's for scholarships or grants in particular. So I think that's a really great thing that there's an understanding there on both sides. That, we will have those conversations and we'll make sure that, again, your wishes are honored. And you've already answered this last question, Nora, really well, I'd say, but you might want to add something else. Do you have to specify a dollar amount when making their bequest. And I will say that we often see percentages of an estate. And I'm glad that you'd mentioned as well that perhaps a percentage will mean something different when they, when
Yeah.
they've passed, when it's enforced. But maybe they say at least a minimum of, like you said, $100,000 in your example. So really, they can get creative with the language. It sounds like, huh?
Yeah. So if a client said, look, I want to leave, 10% of my estate right now, that's $100,000. But that client says, look, but I'm a successful business person and I may have a $2 million estate when I die. Well, in that instance, the bequest or the gift may read under the will, I give the greater of $100,000 or 10% of my estate. And that way, if it's the greater and the estate is 2 million, the foundation is getting a $200,000 gift as opposed to a $100,000 gift. So there's very creative ways that we can address that.
Excellent. Great.